Alright guys, so now we're to the point where we're going to put the crankshaft in the engine. So the first thing you have to do is install your main bearings. So when you get your kit, you're going to have two halves. And I know this may seem silly to some of you, but the ones with the hole go in the block, because that's where your oil hole is. The ones with no hole go in your main caps. You're going to have one that looks funny. This is your thrust bearing. On the LS, that goes in the center. These do not have a tang, so they can go either way. So we usually just get started where our hole lines up. I always start with the thrust bearing, because the rest of the bearings in the kit, they will go either, they only go one way. So we get all 5 mains into the block. Oh, and I mentioned the thrust did not have a tang, so this, if you can see if it'll focus, that's the tang on the bearing. It goes in to this receiver on the block. So I always start it in like that, and then push up. Now that will be a little different on these when we get to lay the crankshaft in. So next you'll take the assembly lube of your choice. I use this Cleveite assembly lube. Always had good luck out of it. And you're going to lube the bearings up. I just get some on there and then kind of move it around my finger. I always put a little extra on the sides of the thrust bearing, since that's where the crank will be riding. There to be pushing in and out. Okay, so now we've got the assembly lube. So now it's time to drop the crankshaft in. And this is our stock 58 tooth reluctor wheel crankshaft. Sit in to make sure it turns. So another thing I will note, I did this before I started filming, so when you put the crank in, before you do that, all of your oil holes, take a blow nozzle and blow through air through each of these, just to make sure you don't have any trash inside. So now comes the tricky part on the LS, the main caps. So the main caps are numbered, usually on the left side. So if you've got the engine flipped over this way, they'll be to your left. So this, of course, is our thrust bearing. So I always like to just set that one in place when I'm getting these laid out. So well, let's just go ahead and lube it up while we don't have to do that again. So we'll lube this in the middle and on the sides. And then we'll get that one started. So, like I said, these caps are numbered. So let's say now we're going to go work my way back to number 2. So if you look, number 2 has one tang. And the block has one, is on this side. If you look, this tang is on this side. But it's your only option. So that is kind of opposite of what a lot of the old school engines did. But that's the way this one works. So we'll get the bearing in the number 2, lube it up, and then we'll slide it in place. Like I say, keeping in fact that your number goes to this side. Now this number 1, this was the tricky one. See, I was talking about the tangs. This one has a tang on either side. So in theory, it could go either way. But there's just a tang on this side. Since we know the rest of them, it goes to the outside, to the opposite direction. We're going to put the tang on this side, right here, to match the other one. So we'll slide our bearing in. Lube it up, and we'll slide that down kind of in place. Now we just have numbers 4 and 5 left. So 4 is the same way. So the tang is opposite. So we'll put our bearing in the only way it will go. And then put our assembly lube on. This one, our numbers are still over here on this side. So now our number 4 is in place. Number 5, here we are again. It is backwards, or it has tangs on both sides rather. But if you look now, this one, the number is on the right hand side facing you. So make sure you don't put this around this way where the number's on the same side, because then this will come into interference with your rear cover. This one they put on backwards for some reason. Lube it up. And now our rear is in place. As you can tell from looking at that front cap, it is not seated. I like to take a dead blow hammer because it doesn't really do any damage. It doesn't hurt to put a couple fasteners in just to kind of hold things, just to get them started. You'll feel it bottom out. Get those started. All right, so all of those are in place. So now I like to give it a turn, make sure it turns okay by hand, because if it doesn't turn okay by hand at this point with no fasteners in it, then you've got issues that you may need to take it to the machine shop for. So next we'll get some fasteners in and do some torquing. Okay guys, so now we just put the caps on, so now it's time to put the fasteners in. You can use an impact on this. I don't like to when using stock stuff because the initial torque setting is only 15 foot-pounds, and then you use an angle gauge. So I'd rather take a little more time and just put them in by hand. Doesn't take that long, and then nothing to worry about. No cross threading, anything of that nature. All right, so they're all snug, and now they're ready for the initial torque. All right, guys. So these things. Okay, guys. So these things. Dang it. Excuse me. All right, so I've snugged these with just a 3/8 ratchet. So now it's time to do the initial torque. So these only torque to 15 foot-pounds, and then you have to use a torque angle gauge. So that's why I like putting these in by hand instead of using an impact. You can put them in with an impact and go way too far too quick. So just that little bit. And this thing is already to that initial torque. I do like to go over mine twice just to make sure. Using a 13mm socket on the inner bolts. The outers are 15mm. They torque to the same initial 15. When you're using an aftermarket fastener like an ARP, they will go to a regular foot-pound instead of using a torque angle. A lot easier, a lot more expensive. But for what we're doing, this will work fine. Okay guys, so in this stock stuff, you have to use a torque angle gauge. So that's what this thing is, right? Has a place for your socket here on the end, and has this adjustable stop. So that has to stop somewhere. I usually try to stop against a main cap or part of the crankshaft if I can. So this one calls for 15 foot-pounds and 80 degrees on our second pass. So, you know, if you can see this, I have, you know, the gauge set to 0 now. So we could pull, you know, I've got a little tension on it. We could pull and try to look at 80, but I find that's hard to do when you're doing this by yourself. So what I try to do is go back 80 degrees. So there's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So now that's staying steady, and all I have to do now is just pull it till I line up with the 0. All right. That looked a lot easier than this really is. It's a pain in the butt. It's a whole lot easier if you have a buddy. I'm not going to bore you guys with the rest of them. It's the same thing for all of them, just the outer bolts go to 53 degrees because I'll probably be cussing a lot during this. So hope that helps you as far as the torquing the mains go. Okay guys, last tidbit about we got the inner and outer mains in and torqued down. So the last thing is our side bolts. So one thing you want to do is take some silicone and put around that. See if I can get it to focus in there for you. Doesn't look like it, but anyway, there you go. So just put a little silicone around the head. And I always, like everything, start everything by hand. You don't want to cross thread anything. There aren't that many threads to these things. You can hit them with the impact. Just start them by hand. You can hit them just on the lowest setting is what I do. Because these do only torque to 18 foot-pounds. So not a lot, like I'm not even letting the gun hit it. So 18 foot-pounds and just in one pull. And that is that.